Hello. I'm here to read last Sunday's text, but the site's not working. It says not found, request ID. Oh my god, has the website disappeared? What? Okay. This is worrying. What a worrying moment to go live. Oh no, it's fine. It's just the link. Okay. All right. Well, that was weird. Hey everyone, how are you? Hope you're good and having a nice Thursday. I've just come back off a day off for Diwali, which was lovely, actually. Really nice. Okay. Right. I look terrible, actually. Whatever. Let me settle down. Okay. Cool. We're back. We're ready. We're groovy. We're not groovy. Hold on, where's the website gone? This is just a mess today. What a rambly start. Okay. She's ready, finally. All right. So I'm going to be reading last Sunday's text, which was a review of The African Desperate, a film directed by Martine Sims, starring Diamond Stingley, and it is exclusively streaming on Mubi. You can get 30 days free via the link in the description from us, Mubi/us to you. And worth it because there's a whole bunch of other films that you can peep on Mubi as well. I'm going to read this now, but heads up that this Sunday, we're going to be releasing a special podcast episode where we read out people's art school horror stories. So stay tuned for that. Keep your eyes peeled for that. Enough chat. I'm going to read the text and then we're going to talk about some of the BTS content behind the scenes, not Korean pop sensation BTS. Unfortunately. Okay. So, all right. The 3 years I spent at St. Martin's were the weirdest 3 years of my life. I look back at art school like it was a fever dream. The way dreams feel like they're happening to you, but not you yourself. You're someone else entirely. You slip in and out of your body at the same time. Art schools are crazy sitcom institutions. I think that's the point of them. That slippage of self where you're in and out of body as vehicle. The more I think about it, the more I am convinced that the slippage was the entire point. Grab these kids and whack them in a blender, pull them out of the context of their families and homes and their normal everyday lives. Make them question everything. Make them feel like they're in outer space on a reality show. No, wait. A daytime TV show. A daytime TV game show. But there are no rules. Or they don't know the rules yet. Just make them feel like the normal laws of physics don't apply. See what they make when they're in this headspace, off the rails, in orbit, and unhinged. It will probably be terrible, but it will also be great. That's educational. That's how you learn how to be a person, or at least that's how I began learning how to be a person. I should clarify, I am very pro art school. Yes, art schools are institutions, and I normally flinch at the idea of anything remotely approaching an institution, but I'm glad I went, I think. I'm glad I had my normal torn away from me. I'm glad I had 3 years to watch my world collapse around me. Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm yawning. It's just that time in the day when I'm just not really alive. Okay. I'm glad I had 3 years to watch my world collapse around me while I questioned everything. I'm glad I had space to fumble for attempts at an answer. I believe in the transformational power of any process that overhauls your worldview. I think art school is one of those things. Process. Art school might be a verb, an action that is done to you. It's a conditioning, a coating. a full head to toe body spray that you shimmy through, mist, emerge on the other side of like a drive-through car wash. I'm only half joking. Considering the way art schools embed the need to question and truly inspect things, the endless emphasis on criticality and reflection, the experience of art school is not extensively looked at as a subject itself. At least, not as extensively as you might think it'd be. It gets to slide on past. I'm so sorry. This isn't a reflection on you. You're terrific company. It's just that point in the day where I'm like, I don't know, I'm alive. It gets to slide on past while we look at the rest of the world with our big, juicy artist brains. Meanwhile, these institutions coat us with their shiny paint. We emerge changed, or if not changed, then at least glazed from this mist we've just shimmied through. The African Desperate is a film about an art student. Palace Bryant is just about to graduate from her MFA at an art school in upstate New York. The film was directed by Martine Sims, Palace is played by Diamond Stingley, and IRL, they're both actual established artists operating at the upper end of the art world. Blue chip commercial galleries, art fairs, the lot. The film is streaming exclusively on Mubi now. We follow Palace on the last 24 hours of her MFA. It opens with her final crit, slides through the end of term party, and we leave with Palace as she arrives back home in Chicago. It is a film that bridges a weird time. It opens at an end, ends at a beginning, and we are there to witness the overlap. Liminality, transition, messy spillage from phase to phase. That's where stories get made. At least the stories I'm interested in hearing. Palace is shifting gears. That moment when you're running and both feet are off the ground. A split second. Barely visible, but weightless. Palace's experience of art school is specific. I mean, everyone's experience is specific, but we are seeing things that Palace is privy to. And that is the way a white institution buckles under the weight of its own whiteness, the way it handles Palace, but also the way Palace shifts under the lights and falls through these spaces. What is happening? Palace is a black woman, and institutionally racist feels like a big term, so vague and baggy. It sounds abstract or enormous, a hyper object, LMAO. An entity so vast that it bamboozles traditional ideas about what it even is in the first place. But institutions are just groups of people who have chosen to organise themselves in a particular way for a particular purpose. Institutions are just modes of governance and distribution. It's not complicated to say. The way we experience an institution slides from the structural to the interpersonal, back and forth seamlessly. I say we because we all experience this sliding scale. But what we experience between the structural and the interpersonal is specific. It differs according to who we are. Opening at an endpoint. Palace's final crit is excruciating. One of her tutors has written an introduction to her work, which he reads aloud. It might as well be a newspaper horoscope or the auto-generated output of a text simulator. Screenland is the underground and overlay for consciousness in Palace's work, with consciousness understood as being made of multiple entry and exit points filled with voices and their shapes, exerting and relieving pressure on that question of how to live in all kinds of amazing and fucked up ways. It might be a touching emotional moment if it weren't for the fact that the introduction is more about affirming the tutor's position as a guy that gets it, whatever it actually is. Another tutor quotes Fred Moten at her, then Glissant and Glissant again. Heavy theory that Palace already understands. So when this tutor gets the meaning or application a bit twisted, it becomes deeply awkward. I can't tell if there's something stressful happening with the tutor's repeated citation of black theorists to a black student. It doesn't dwell on that stress though. The theory is only a relational tool, a way for the second tutor to attempt to relate to the work or gain some kind of proximity, understanding. You're scared of your own appetite, she says. diagnosing Palace. A third tutor repeatedly congratulates her on everything she has achieved over the past 3 years. He's polite but insincere. He's being patronising. The repetition makes the praise feel functional and hollow, like he's saying it just to have something to say. In moments like this, across the scene of the crypt, the script feels like a perfect, tight, and absolute thing. It's easy to forget that this is fiction and someone, Martine, has written it. These people don't actually exist. Ha ha ha, or do they? The actual language of it all, it's funny but painful. Ultimately, it's very good satire because there's a fundamental or inherent truth to what's playing out on screen. The fourth tutor, Rose, has got gripes. She says, "Everyone here goes easy on you. A lot of artists of your generation, of your race, female, are making work like you. Hunter-gatherer sculpture, found materials, appropriated photography." She gestures, mouth turning down at the edges, little shrug. "How are you going to differentiate yourself?" Maybe Rose's question seems neutral out of context. It could be an innocent question. But all of Palace's tutors are unwilling or unable or unwilling to engage with her work. Some of them try to talk around it, at it, just never about it. In the end, they all just tell her things. A mixture of stuff that's fucked up and non sequitur. Sequitur? I heard someone, as an aside, a little break, but just to complain about pronouncing things. I heard someone on a podcast pronounce non sequitur as non sequitur. Like the stress was all funny and completely different to the way I thought you pronounce it. I don't know now how you pronounce it because I've never heard someone else say it out loud. I've just said non sequitur. Non sequitur? Is it non sequitur? That sounds weird. Please write in or leave a comment. Which one? One or two? Sequitur, sequitur. Which one is it? We don't know. Maybe it's the third unknown thing. I don't want to Google it. A mixture of stuff. That's fucked up and non sequitur. Palace reads a quote from a book, Colette Thomas's The Testament of the Dead Daughter. "Drama is the representation of the world at its stop point." The quote hangs in the air, sliding by unacknowledged. Exactly, her tutors say, nodding wisely. They continue talking about what they actually want to talk about, which is secretly, low-key, Palace. "Where did you grow up? West Side Chicago?" Rose asks. She's not really asking, though. She knows where Palace grew up. She's just trying to open up an avenue of questioning that is more directly about, well, they cannot grapple with her work. They can only see her. Their insistence on reading Palace's work through her identity, her subjecthood, the very fact of her as a person in front of them. That's interesting and illustrative, because by only seeing her, not her work, they also refuse to see her as an artist. Their evasive engagement with her work is a refusal to handle it as an artwork. It's obviously racist, but it's tried to leave it at that, like racism is the bottom of that interaction. In this excruciating crypt scene, we see a finely tuned demonstration of what happens, how it happens, and if we pay very close attention, we kind of see why. They don't understand Palace's work because they don't really understand Palace. It's a weird and interesting dynamic where they miss the point of the work and focus in on the artist, but in doing so, they are confronted by their lack of understanding or lack of ability to understand on an interpersonal level as well as a professional or artistic level. I think fundamentally, they just don't understand what she's doing there in the art school. They don't treat her like an artist because they don't really see her as one. They don't believe in her ability to make things about anything other than herself because critical distance is a confidence trick. It doesn't really exist, but you've got to make people believe it's there. And they don't believe it. She isn't extended the same grace or generosity that I imagine they extend to other students. Rose's questioning makes me think. She sees her inability to understand Palace's work as a failure that belongs to Palace, rather than being an empathetic failure on Rose's own behalf. All of these things are guesses at motivation. The fundamental point is that Palace is presented to us as a lonely figure. She is misunderstood. She is alone and singular and isolated, even if it is a conceptual isolation. Palace is adamant. She's not going to the end of term party. I spent all summer with these fools. I'm done. Not another night. Of course, she goes to the party. She's meant to be DJing. An email went out about it. She takes some drugs, quite a lot actually. As the night wears on, these little moments flag up, fully loaded. Portia, a white woman, yells, "I hate white women," sort of unprompted. It's just a declaration, something she must externalise. Palace cannot find a single person who has an Android charger. The students dance to unt unt music with wild limbs, offbeat, completely seriously. Everyone holds each other at a kind of academic distance. They're friends, and they declare their undying. I need a nap. Everyone holds each other at a kind of academic distance. They're friends, and they declare their undying love for each other. But it's only ever just that, a declaration, something they must externalise. It is told rather than shown. Palace staggers through the party, increasingly fucked up by the mix of substances. Her vision starts splitting and lights blur and the world becomes hazy. I read an interview where Martine Sims says the drugs are a portal. They collapse and create dimensions. Palace is on a hero's journey, and all heroes' journeys have to venture. All heroes' journeys have to venture to the underworld. But if they're a portal, I'm not entirely sure how to describe what's on the other side. Because Palace emerges and she is different. She is coated in a shiny, shimmery mist. Art school has changed her. Through the film, a character called Ezra pops up at these jarring and inopportune moments. He's introduced to us as Palace's crush, a lanky white art boy with an awkward haircut and terrible social skills. He's boring, irritating. I completely understand Palace's attraction to him. At the very beginning, before the crit, he walks past Palace's studio. He stands in the doorway and waves, silently smiles, and moves on. He calls Palace before the party, urging her to come. But I thought we were going to hang out. There's a question mark in brackets. This could be a question, an invitation, or an expression of disappointment. I can't tell if it is one, all, or none. He delivers the line flat, confused. At the party, J. Paul's Jasmine starts playing, a universal sexy bop. And Palace and Ezra dance slow. He lures her out into a quiet hallway, saying, "We never did a studio visit. Let's do a studio visit now," which is, as an aside, such a deeply unsexy pickup line. It's so funny. They kiss, fumble. Ezra attempts to make a move, but it's so ambiguous that Palace misses it. Ezra returns at the end of the night when Palace is collapsed, face down in the school car park, only inches away from her car. He scoops her up and puts her in the driver's seat. When she wakes up the next morning, he is sat in the passenger seat and staring at her. I think if Palace snaps, if she changes or emerges on the other side of the portal, it's here. She has emerged from the drug haze portal with a different attitude to the nonsense of it all. When Ezra gives her the same low energy, ambiguous attention, she rolls her eyes. "Honestly, Ezra, you've been pissing me off all summer." He makes flimsy justifications, but Palace isn't hearing it. "Fuck me or get out of the car, Ezra." She starts insulting him and he just takes it. And all of a sudden, Palace is powerful. "Fuck me or you're racist." She's laughing at him. She doesn't take him seriously. She doesn't care. But it's a different not caring to the not caring at the beginning of the film. In the crit, Palace didn't care in a silent, passive way. She was unwilling to fight for herself, or maybe she was unable to. Things happened to her, and the only thing she could control was her own lack of reaction. But in the car with Ezra, things are different. She has changed. She straddles Ezra, makes him count out her fingers. 3, I think it's 3, 4, 5. She then puts her entire hand in his mouth until he gags. She slaps him, makes him bark like a dog. Then she tells him to get out of her car. It's funny. It made me laugh a lot. But it's also this serious shift in Palace's attitude. She doesn't care, but she's also done. Not caring means she can do what she likes instead of just having things happen to her. And it's interesting the way art school is an experience that happens to you until all of a sudden it doesn't anymore. One day you just find yourself being different. You find that something inside you has snapped. You have changed. You have this internal resistance that wasn't there before, but it has been forged by the consistent process, eroding away, waiting for that part of you to snap. It's like art school wants us to fight it, and often we only figure out that we can fight just as we're about to leave. It's a subtle shift. Part of me feels like I'm reaching or projecting, but I think the shift is there. Art school is a lonely place. It never stops being lonely for Palace. She bounces from studio to summer rental, to her car, to her friend's house. The distance that her peers and tutors handle her at is still there at the end. She's kind of revered and reviled simultaneously. It's almost indistinguishable from the academic distance everyone has from each other, but it's palpable at specific times. But if art school is a lonely place, it's a productive kind of loneliness. Palace belongs there, not just because, oh, why shouldn't she? That's patronising. Palace belongs there because she has been changed. She has the shiny, shimmery art school coating. She's been transformed by the institution too. This is what it looks like on her. She's emerged from the portal with her new attitude. She's done with tiptoeing around the idea that her place there is precarious. She has power. She can do things. Isn't that beautiful? Palace is leaving the school, but she's also not really leaving for good. The rest of the art world is waiting for her, and that whole circus is more of the same. She's in the Venice Biennale. She's booked and busy. She's going to be okay. So maybe it's not lonely in a sad way. Maybe Palace is just free, and with that freedom comes a kind of loneliness, of being changed by the spaces you pass through, of looking after yourself, of fighting, of being special or distinct. If Palace is lonely, it's because it's a requirement. Palace is the hero. The film ends with Palace wheeling 3 suitcases through a train station. She's Palace Bryant. She's going to be okay. Throughout the film, Diamond Stingley presents Palace to us like she's this reactive sprite, cheeky and nonchalant, a hero. As the film ends, Palace is full of restless energy, but we don't ever find out where that energy goes. Good. I don't want to know. I can probably guess or hope. Art world success, a dazzling career. I think The African Desperate is a film that sees art schools for what they are, for what they do and how they work on us, towards us. I think it is clever, emotional and true. I think it is perfect and genius and very fucking funny. We spend precious years of our lives in these spaces. Art schools. Take a shot every time I yawn. Art schools literally make us, most of us, because art schools are still seen and treated like a requirement for access into the art world. And it's interesting the way we fall through these spaces, the way we belong in them, the way they chew us up, but we have no alternative but to fling ourselves through them all the same. And I think it's a good thing, but it's also a sad thing. Before she leaves, Palace rests her head on her friend Hannah's lap. She says, I died last night. I might still be dead. She's being flippant, but it's also completely the entire point. In learning to fight, in being changed by this portal process, mist coating, we die. Our outlooks shift, and the people we were before disappear. So we die. we could still be dead. Art school was a verb that happened to me, and for my part, I'm so glad I died. It is where I began learning how to be a person. But if we are transformed by the institutions we pass through, we should pay very close attention to the coating, the way we emerge from these portals covered, head to toe, and lacquered. And that is the review. As a reminder, Martine Sims's The African Desperate is streaming exclusively on Mubi now, and you can get 30 days free by going to the link in our bio as a little present from us and Mubi. This text was, heads up, I'm going to do the footnote now. Full transparency, this text was commissioned by Mubi, and so is the podcast that's coming out on Sunday. As usual, you can check our accounts to see what jobs we do and how much we are paid for them. We're going to follow this up with a podcast discussing people's art school experiences, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If maybe we should do the emoji game. So, as a little fun game at the end of like the podcast and the video and the text, if you read all the way through, we leave a little emoji at the end to be like, oh my god, go comment this on like the Instagram post or like the Twitter post that we posted to tell everyone about this review. Just as like a little, oh my god, who's here? Inside Club. It's a silly game, but it's fun and cute. So the little emoji for the emoji game, if you've made it this far, congratulations first of all. Second of all, the emoji is the little cowboy, because I think it sums up the loneliness and power that's discussed in the text. Powerful, lonely cowboy. Maybe that gives you a bit too much of an insight into my psyche, but we move. Drop that in the Instagram comments or reply to the tweet and let me know if you think there's a more fitting emoji that I have overlooked, because maybe that's just me and the way I feel about art school. Maybe you think that there is another emoji symbol that can act as your figurehead. I would like to know and get a frightening insight into your psyche. All right, thoughts, BTS content, I will say. I think I often think about this. Can you hear that? I often think about the way that art school works, because it's a specific kind of teaching, a specific kind of education, right? If you're going to go study medicine, you go to university, you go to med school, right? You go to university, you do a medical course, and they teach you about the parts of the human body and different diseases and things, and they make you cut up some people, right? There's a specific way of teaching medicine because it's a science. Art is kind of like this intangible talent. Ability to make art is like this intangible talent. Often it feels like it's an intangible talent that you either have or you don't have. Maybe it's like technical skill. You can work on it, right? But like you've either got it or you've not got it. What art school actually does, and the way that it teaches you, is, I think, a slightly different form of teaching. Maybe this is where the word pedagogy comes in. Is that the word I'm thinking of? Because I always get confused between pedagogy, hegemony, methodology, and the other one about hierarchies, and I always forget what that is. The method and pedagogy, the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or theoretical concept. Yes, that is what I mean. So there's a specific pedagogy when it comes to art school. Art school's got like a specific pedagogical method, specific pedagogical MO, let's put it like that. And I often think that this as a sentence like really runs around my mind, and I'm about to misquote it, I think, quite badly. But there's like a line in Morgan Quaintance's New Conservatism essay that he published on eFlux, where he was speaking about how just like the wider rigorous conceptual education of art school. Let me actually find the quote. This might not actually be worth finding because it might just be better to paraphrase it, but Maybe not that. I'm so sorry to anyone that's literally watching live and direct. The one person, God bless you. Bear with me while I'm Googling. Thank you. I bet you it's Gab. I'm going to find this quote, even if it kills me. Okay. I might have made up this quote. It's in Teleology and the Turner Prize. That's the essay. Right, okay. Bear with me. Two people now. Right, okay, so it's in Morgan Quaintance's essay published on eFlux called Teleology and the Turner Prize, or Utility, the New Conservatism, not the other New Conservatism essay, which is different and longer. I'm just going to read this bit because I think it's relevant and interesting if we're thinking about the way that art schools change us and the way that conceptual education is meant to change us, and like that's on purpose, right? The shiny clothing we come out of art school with that I spoke around in the essay, that's on purpose. So I'm just going to read this bit. Although the reduction of technical skills-based learning in UK art education has led commentators to speculate on the deprofessionalisation of art, it is undoubtedly the case that rigorous conceptual training, in which the development of critical faculties is encouraged and challenged through discussion, group critique, lecture, and written assessment, has taken its place. This has developed in response to a field that, since the 1960s, grew uncomfortable with its co-option by powerful governmental, financial, or ideological forces, a field that increasingly produced art that problematized and drew critical attention to its modes of display and exchange, not to mention the culture, society, and politics that made that display and exchange possible. So basically, what Morgan is saying there is that, like, the wacky weirdness that art school has is kind of like on purpose. It's a radical conceptual rigorous conceptual training that kind of is there so that you're this weird person outside of the loop of like powerful governmental, financial, ideological forces, and that you can sit there and be like, aha, right, I'm going to galaxy brain this and think about the modes of display and exchange and also the culture, society, and politics that makes that display and exchange possible. Sounds like a mouthful, but actually it's this like kind of like wizardry, this wizard ability that the artist is supposed to have, or like conceptual art, if done correctly or if done like successfully, has the ability to kind of like cinch in like its own context. It's like this weird meta galaxy brain thing where it like bends the space around it and it can kind of like speak truth to power, basically. And Morgan goes on to say, in other words, contemporary art is a critically engaged field that, for the most part, produces critically engaged actors who are uncomfortable with state power and its various methods of citizen subjection. This is nowhere more prevalent. Diligent. This is nowhere more prevalent. Can I read? This is nowhere more prevalent, diligently observed, or else thoroughly critiqued than in socially engaged practice. And then he goes on to talk about socially engaged practice and the idea of utility, the new conservatism. It's very worth reading that essay. I think that's the end of his thoughts on art school, but it's worth reading for other reasons because I think it kind of does a really good job of like chatting through the problems with social practice and the way that social practice is deployed by state actors in service of state interests and the way that utility is deployed in service of state interests alongside that. But enough. I think it's worth thinking about like the end goal of like being in the art world. Like, what's the point? Like, what's the point of being an artist? As an artist, what is your job? According to Morgan Quaintance, it's so you can draw critical attention to the modes of problematize and draw critical attention to the modes of display and exchange. That's kind of like the purpose of like conceptual art. Like, conceptual art is this weird liquid lumpy thing that like has this kind of like inherent magic that's able to like bend space and understanding around itself. It's a trickster, right? It's able to present as one thing, question the limits around it, and like act in this duplicitous way, kind of like it can contain multitudes. And the artist is a person that can hold on to all these different strands of thinking and make something that's like inherently complex and nuanced and able to hold on to those multitudes. And that makes them therefore a kind of magician. If you follow, I hope that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. I think that makes sense. I think that makes sense. I think that's why I am pro art school. Like, I think art school is a really interesting place to be. And I don't think that's just because I went and I enjoyed myself and I came out the other end, I think, a better person. I think art school, like the specific mode of teaching, the weird wackiness, is a bit loopy, but the way that it kind of breaks you apart, it's interesting. I think it's interesting because I think there is so much within this film. I think it's something that they should show people in art schools just so they kind of know what's going on or what's happening to them, even though the whole idea is that they're not really meant to know what's happening to them. It's just meant to kind of like, you come out the other end and you're like, oh my God, I'm different. Like, I'm woke now, or like I've taken the red pill in the Matrix, or like, you know what I mean? Like, all of a sudden you've become this like critical sleeper agent, not to like buy into like the art world's own delusions of grandeur, right? Like, but you know, at extremity in a slightly narrativized world, these things kind of maybe feel a bit more dramatic. But like, you know, we're going to lean into the dramaticness of it. I think it's just kind of meant to happen to you, and you're just meant to kind of you let these things happen to you until all of a sudden one day you're like, nah, it's done, I'm fixed, right? Fuck that. And like, you're just this critical agent, right? That's able to channel, you're this magician. And I think the reason I enjoyed this film so much is because it holds on to the weird wackiness of art school, but also it holds on to like the kind of the reason why you go in the first place, right? Like, the reason I read so many reviews of The African Desperate while writing my own review that were like, this is a film about like how white institutions are racist. And I think that is patronizing, because it's about that, but it's also about the way that racism works, the way that it feels, and the way that like the institution just kind of happens to you alongside, not despite, but like as well as the racism, right? Like, the racism is a component part of like multiple other wackinesses within the film. And it's interesting. Art school happens to Palace despite the racism, or like on top of the racism, and the racism happens on top of the art schooling and despite the art schooling. And it's like she still comes out the other end with that rigorous conceptual training, and she's shifted, she's different, she's a wizard now, she's a wizard, Harry, you know, she's a magician because she's got this like actual power within these interactions with her peers that are like palpable, right? Like her shoving her fist down Ezra's gob, that feels illustrative of the wider point, right? Like, I don't know if I'm reaching. I really don't know if I'm reaching. Maybe this is just giving you too intimate a look into my own psyche. Maybe this is projection. I fear it may be. But I think basically, in reading all those reviews being like, The African Desperate is about racist art school, I got really like fucking annoyed reading through these endless reviews, being like, yes, and like the racism at art school isn't the bottom of that experience. It's racist full stop. It's like, it's racist. And this is the way it works. Why though? And not just why, what else? And because I think, right, I think the art world loves a singular genius, right? Really believes in the power of the artist as solitary genius, right? Singular genius. But I think framing this film as like a hero's journey is really interesting. And it was interesting to read that interview with Martine Sims and hear her talk about like the different component parts behind the film and the different motivations. Not like explaining it, not in that kind of way, but like kind of talk about and around the film. Because I think it gives a better bottom than just racist, full stop. So hearing the phrasing of like hero's journey makes sense. The art world loves a solitary genius, but what happens when there actually is someone that is special, that is distinct, that is a little bit different to her peers and can shift the power towards herself and like act as a conduit, right? The person that holds on to all these divergent thoughts and ideas and concepts and just get like that. There's a bit in the car with Ezra where she goes to him, you think you're a catch, like you've been pissing me off all summer, like this back and forth is like giving me whiplash, whatever. And she goes, you think you're a catch, like you're not a catch, you think you're special, you're not special, I'm special. And it's not just her like tooting her own horn, she's right. Like throughout the film, the narrative arc presents her as the hero, and she kind of bumbles through these spaces, like she falls through these spaces, and her tutors simultaneously are like attracted to her, not in like not in that way, but like they kind of they want to be close to her, they want to understand her, they want to have this proximity to her, but they are also like she's also reviled by them, right? Like it's this weird push and pull. It's like this magnetic polar tension, not just with her tutors, with her peers, sometimes even with her friends, like even the ones that kind of like love and support her or show her care beyond the like declarations of care. Like there's this weird push and pull tension that kind of is really interesting. And I think the reason that Palace is special is because she has this restless energy. She has this kind of restless, itinerant existence where she kind of like bounces off the spaces that she's in. Like she goes from studio to crit to like other studio, someone else's studio, summer rental, her friend's house. And she's like, she leaves New York, the upstate New York mysterious unnamed art school by like writing a note to someone that's just never been mentioned. Like all of a sudden, like you discover that she's been renting this place. She just kind of bounces around. She's like this nomad existence. And I don't think that's something to romanticize, but I think that's something that makes her uniquely, like she's got this scrappy resilience that she really kind of doesn't have much choice in, but it's just there nonetheless, and that makes her the hero. Like all these different points converge around her, and she kind of has this magical transformational ability. But yeah, I think that felt like something I couldn't quite fit into the shape of the text. That scene with in the car with Ezra, where she goes, "You think you're a catch, you think you're special, but you're not special. I'm special. I'm Palace Bryant. I'm gonna be okay. Like I'm gonna be fine." It's like she's always been special through the film, but like by the end she's got the ability to recognize and deploy it to her own advantage. And I think that's why it's important. That's why it felt like an important scene visually, for it to end with her wheeling 3 suitcases through the empty train station on the other end of the flight. Like when she gets to Chicago, she's like just wheeling 3 suitcases on her own, and it's like it's fine. I think that's what I mean by like the power and loneliness of like having been through the ringer of art school. Like I think when it works on you, you've got this like at like its most successful end in this narrativized delusion of grandeur when it comes to art school life, right? You've got this scrappy resilience where you are able to be the solitary genius that the art world kind of lionizes and reviles at the same time. And I think it's not just the art world, like culture at large loves a solitary genius, but also loves to lionize and revile the solitary genius. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. I think that's why like culture of celebrity within the art world is such a thing. It the idea of like superstar curators or like superstar artists, like blue chip artists, like blue chip gallerists. It's a solitary individual. We love the story around solitary individuals. I think basically, I think this is an amazing film. I think this is so good, so clever, and there were so many points right. This actually, I think, is really demonstrative. When I sent the first draft of this text over to Gab, the main edit that stuck out to me that I was like, oh my god, I couldn't. Crazy that she had to point this out, but she was like, there was like a point I made about the script, I think with the crit scene, and she was like, make a point about the script, like you write about it like it's real, like it's a real scenario that we're watching, like this is a documentary, like someone's written this is fiction, it's really well written, that's what you're picking up on, like double down on that, like make that explicit. And I was like, didn't even occur to me, like I think the script is so well written that it didn't even occur to me that this was fiction and that someone had thought about it, because I think it is so true, so accurate, but it also lays things out in a way that's really cathartic, and it makes it feel, I think, phrasing it as like the art world's own delusion of grandeur and like leaning into that delusion of grandeur for like actually like quite an interesting, illustrative or like educational, maybe not educational, that's the wrong word, illustrative, for the sake of clarity or coherency, right? Understanding. I think the script's really good at that. It does that really well. I think it lets you kind of zoom out a bit in a way that's so like fundamentally like just like batshit true that you're like, there's no way this is fiction. This is too close to the bone. Too close to the bone, and also like way too accurate, and also holds on to way too much. Yeah. Let me actually go through some of my notes, because I imagine there were quite a few, and I imagine it might be interesting. And I imagine I've probably spoken through most of them already, but as an academic exercise, because I think these lives are an interesting space to do that in. I love like airing out my dirty laundry from the notebook. And I've just seen that Gab's replied saying it is Gab. Put a pack of onion bhajis in the oven. I saw the notification on my phone, so I'm watching while they cook. Cute. I want an onion bhaji now. You know when someone mentions something to you and you're like, didn't realise I was hungry for that until you said it. I think, yeah. I'm reading through the notes super quickly. I think I really want to double down on that quote from the interview with Martine Sims. I think it's really, if you like the film, if you watch the film, like the film, want to understand a little bit more about the film beyond the review, or like any other review, not just mine, other reviews exist. I think it's really worth reading that interview with Martine Sims in Screen Slate. It's linked on the review text page. I think, yeah, it's a really interesting interview. I really like hearing artists talk about the work that they made in. I think Martine's quite reflective and open about what the film is attempting to do. And that's not to say that like an artist is responsible for the interpretation of their work, or like solely responsible for the interpretation of their work. I think rather the opposite. Like they offer one opinion of many, and no authorial authority, right? Death of the author, etc. But it's always interesting. It's always interesting to hear what someone was thinking about or trying to do when they were making something, because I think it makes you pick up on things that maybe you didn't consider while watching it, and it allows you to kind of see other component parts within a system. And I think the two most interesting parts about that interview for me was Martine pointing out that the drugs are a portal, and Palace is on a hero's journey, and all heroes' journeys have to go to the underworld. I think it made the structure of the narrative a lot more clear and like laid it out a bit more coherently for me. I could kind of see like, oh shit, like that's what that's doing. Like it was happening to me as I was watching the film. I watched it like 5 times, like 5, 6 times at the end of it. But I was able to kind of, have a little look-see and kind of know what was going on, what was happening while it was happening. But yeah, the drugs as portal, hero's journey to the underworld. And then also there was another point that Martine made. I was going to read the quotes out, the like little snippets paraphrased. I wanted to talk about what it feels like to be at one of these institutions, especially one that is supposedly progressive or radical. I also think that's the thing that's part of the desperation. Like, I want to participate. You know, to be clear, I made a choice a long time ago to participate. This is the world I want to work in, but that doesn't mean it always feels good. Sitting with that kind of conflict is a big part of my life. I think that's like part of the tension, right? Like Palace being lionized and also reviled. Like Palace has made a choice. She's doing an MFA. Like she's a couple of years worth of investment, right? Like it's not just like the 3 or 4 years you spend foundation and like a BA. Like when you're on an MA, I imagine it's a group of people that are like relatively invested in being artists, that have a level of like skin in the game. The stakes are a little bit higher than they are at BA because like already like you kind of, it's another layer of commitment. And Palace is, that's why I think it's patronizing to be like, oh well, she deserves to be there. Like she belongs there. Of course she has a place there. And that's, I think, the way that these institutions work, right? When the racism is enacted upon you, like it can be like a knee-jerk reaction to say, no, I belong here. Well, it's like, yes, you belong here, not just because, like, oh, you know, everyone belongs here. We're a happy, safe space, progressive institution. No, Palace belongs there because she's gone through that conceptual ringer already on her BA, right? Like her BFA. She's an artist. She's working as an artist. Like we never really see that much of her work, but it must be good enough to be in the Venice Biennale, good enough to like threaten her tutors, or for her tutors to find it threatening or like incomprehensible. I think it's really interesting it's just occurred to me. It's really interesting as a choice that we never really see her work. We only see these snippets and like these bits, right? Like the bits that she presents in the crit, like we just kind of see the surface of her work, like Rose pointing at like a couple collection of objects, like saying hunter gatherer sculpture, found objects, appropriated imagery. We see these things like flash up in moments, but we never hear Palace like explain her own understanding of her work. So it just kind of gets chewed up. But I mean, you know, we've got to assume that she's half decent or decent as an artist, right? She's a functioning artist. She's in the Venice Biennale. Like the idea that like her participation needs to be justified as like a progressive act is kind of right. Like it feels like a racist turn in and of itself, right? The idea that like by countering racism, you are doing a philanthropic act rather than just being a base, normal, neutral, standard person, right? The idea that anti-racism is something that people should be rewarded for, right? The idea that being a progressive institution should be, I don't know, that you should congratulate people on being progressive. It's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic because I don't think there's any way for like Palace to be treated equitably within this institution other than to just go through the ringer and experience it. Like you kind of have to, right? Like in being in these institutions, you just kind of have to sign up to being like chewed up in one way or another, right? Whether it's race, whether it's class, whether like all of these things that like are they just like fuck with your experience of being in an art school. And this is such a galaxy brain moment. Years ago, I feel like I've got more and more unhinged as this live has gone on. Years ago, right, I wrote a text called "Can White People Ever Be Radical?" And I think it was the last text I wrote that made the internet lose its mind. Ever since, I've not wanted to write anything controversial because, quite frankly, the NFT people are nuts, right? That's what the N in NFT stands for, nutty. But I think secretly having a horrible time at art school, not to turn this into like a thing. And, I'm saying this like half committed to this thought. So I don't want to talk about this after I've said it because I don't even know if I agree with it. But I think part of the rigorous conceptual education that you go through, rigorous conceptual training that art school gives you, I think you kind of have to have a bad time. Because I think the bad time is what makes you want to fight the institution, right? And I think that's why when I wrote "Can White People Ever Be Radical?" too long didn't read, the answer is no. I think that's why white men make bad art, because they at no point ever learn how to fight the institution of art itself. They never have the ability, right? Like if we return class to Morgan's essay, Teleology and the Turner Prize, if he says, this is developed in response to a field that since the 60s grew uncomfortable with its corruption by powerful governmental, financial, or ideological forces, a field that increasingly produced art that problematized and drew critical attention to its modes of display and exchange, not to mention the culture, society, and politics that made that display and exchange possible. I think that is something that emerges once you want to fight an institution, right? Art school trains you up to fight it. And I think that's why white people can't be radical. Because does that make sense? Very much a soft thought. I might not agree with this. I'm having doubts. No, do you know what? Let's double down. Why not? I think that part of art school, 100% seriously, I think that part of art school's teaching style, pedagogically speaking, you have to have a bad time. Because that's what makes you want to throw hands. And then you're able to make work that's loopy as fuck and can draw attention to that's what makes you able to make work that draws critical attention to its modes of display and exchange, not to mention the culture, society, and politics that make that display and exchange possible. There's a thought for you. I mean, commit to it or not. Maybe I don't actually think that, but I think it's worth thinking about, like how much of because right. I think it's, if we think about Martine Sims saying, like, this is the field that I have chosen to participate in. I want to participate. I don't have to enjoy it. I've chosen to be here. I don't have to enjoy all component parts of it. But like, what's it like being in these spaces? She's drawing attention to, like, right? Is that joining up that thought? It's like the way that these forces are enact themselves upon us. It has an effect, and it characterizes the art that we make decades down the line at the other end of art school. I don't know if I'm like making art school sound terrific or terrible. Both, I hope. But I'm going to leave this here because we're coming up to an hour, and I've just dropped a sizzling galaxy brain level confusing take. So I'll leave you with that element of mystery. If it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We commit to thinking. I've not finished the thought either, have I, really? But I'm going to go get my 4th Pret coffee subscription coffee of the day, have a little cig, do some more work, and then go home, because it's been clearly, today's just not happening for me. No, do I want to finish that thought? Yes, I do want to finish that thought because I'm not done with it. Right. Okay, hang in there with me, 3 people that are still watching it, maybe Gab plus 2 others. Right. If oh, 1 left. I'm so sorry to that person who I got 2 people. Gab plus another person. Drop it in the comments if you have a thought. What if both those people are Gab watching on 2 different devices? Gabrielle, basically, if you're still here, chip in. Do you know what I'm saying though? I think part of the pedagogical experience, right? The pedagogical forces that are enacted upon you in art school, like it's like you kind of like you hit these snags, right? Where Clarissa says, I think I understand. I think same. Like I'm in the same position here. I'm saying things and I'm like, I understand. I think I don't know. I'm. Oh no, the other person is a bot. Oh. um. Okay, so I'm trying to think through the thought. I've lost the thought. It's gone. Maybe I'll pick it up in a bit. Give me a couple of days with this. This is going to irritate me. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense? Do you know what? It's making less and less sense the more I think about it. So maybe it isn't a thing. It's making less and less sense, and I'm less and less willing to commit to this. I just think that like maybe part of an institution's MO and like teaching style is like the ability to make you like an angry person. I'm talking about getting politicized basically, and I think part of that conceptual education is like a political conceptual education where you understand the forces that exist in the art world around you, societally, culturally speaking, and it gives you the ability to kind of reclaim an element of agency within these dynamics where these forces are at work, right? So like these forces are at work out in the art world. When Palace leaves that school in upstate New York, the same thing's going to be playing out, right? Like she's going to have the same experiences that she had at art school, just in a less condensed, contained, right, concentrated environment. So when I say that she's leaving, but not really, the art world's more of the same. Like the art world's just kind of like the same, right? So it's really important that she has that shift where she snaps and she like shoves her fist down Ezra's. She puts her fist in Ezra's mouth, right? And she's like, it's important that she makes him bark, right? It's funny, but it's important that she's able to make these idiot people in the art world that are gonna take the piss, that think that they're special, that like offer her nothing but like ambiguity. It's important that within the space of her interactions with people like that she's able to kind of make them her bitch, because it's an important psychological shift, right? Where she's like, right at the beginning, the crit happens, it's terrible. She comes out crying, like it's just like a horrible, violent experience. And she goes from having things happen to her, like she doesn't care throughout the film, right? She's nonchalant, but the beginning not caring is different to the end not caring. At the beginning, she just lets these things happen to her. She's just willing to like go limp, go floppy, and like she doesn't care. So like, why should she bother to fight? And at the end, she's like, I don't care, so I'm gonna fight. Or like, I don't care about what will happen if I fight you and it goes wrong. Like she doesn't care in different ways. And I think the thing that's shifted is like the power within those scenarios. So maybe it's agency is the wrong word. It's just like it's like like when people talk about like yin and yang, and like the way that energy is like gendered in like an abstract way, like one's like feminine, passive, receptive, one of them's masculine, Ursula Le Guin, the spear of history, right? Like active. It's like a shift between those two energies. I mean, you know, energetic binaries. Energy is a spectrum. It's a silly. That's a silly way of conceptualizing it, but it makes it make more sense. This has now stopped making sense again, so I'm going to leave. God bless you two people for hanging on in there, even if one of you is a bot. All right. See you later. Wait. Don't go. I have to give you the info again for a third time. Why not? So, yes. Hi. Martine Sims's The African Desperate is streaming. Not screaming, streaming exclusively on Mubi now, and you can get 30 days free by going to the link. I'll whack it in the description, and it'll be linked on the review page that the text has been published on. So if you really don't know where it is, then it's there. I do recommend it. I reckon watch the film because I think it is. I'm not just saying that because I'm being paid to say that as well. We didn't agree to do this until we watched the actual little streaming link. And we were like literally dying over the film. It's so good. I think it's worth watching. And there are other things on Mubi that you can watch as well. So genuinely love Mubi. Thanks for listening. Bye.